World of 40K is a very large and vast world encompassing a lot of different forms of media, from books to traditional YouTube videos to games to the tabletop. There's really just a ton. But if you really want to get into Warhammer 40K, then you kind of have to have like a baseline and understanding, you know, of basic lore and things like that in the universe. So that's where I come in. This video, we're going to be talking about the basic kind of structure and a lot of the biggest factions in Warhammer 40K. And alongside those factions, I'll talk about some of the concepts and things like that, so you get a better understanding of the universe and like the kind of world that it is. Humanity in 40K, the history of humanity is largely the same as ours, except for the fact that during the 15th to 25th millennium, humanity went through a kind of age of technology, you know what I mean? Like a golden age of humanity. In that age, we developed all sorts of things like black hole guns and interstellar travel and a lot of other technology that is simply lost to time in the world of 40K. However, this age didn't last very long. Soon after this came a age called the Age of Strife, which the Age of Strife was sort of like a mix between like Fallout, and Mad Max, and every other apocalyptic kind of, you know, scenario you could imagine. Now this period of time lasted about until like the 30th millennia, until the Emperor of Mankind stepped in, and he decided that it was about time for him to unify humanity under one leader, one who would lead them to great prosperity and fortune. Now, the Emperor of Mankind was born around the same time as Jesus. The Emperor of Mankind had all sorts of insane godlike powers, like immortality, immunity to all diseases. In order to assert his power, the Emperor of Mankind created these beings known as the Primarchs, which were basically kind of like his children clone things. They essentially were him, but slightly different in the fact that they were created using his DNA through gene seeds, but they all had different traits and looked differently and had a bit different personalities. Now, the Emperor, he created these individuals to be basically perfect in his image. He created them to be the extensions of his power and to kind of bring humanity to a new age of prosperity and fortune, because he couldn't control it all by himself. Well, the Chaos Gods in the Warp, which we'll talk about later, the Immaterium, they kind of didn't like this. They saw the Emperor of Mankind as a huge issue with his presence in the Warp and his power. And so the Chaos Gods, as soon as the Primarchs were created, the Chaos Gods took the Primarchs, threw them all over these homeworlds, all over the galaxy. And through this, they then grew up in very harsh, terrible environments that were not what they were supposed to grow up in. And because of this, all the Primarchs became at least a little bit corrupted. Now, each of the Primarchs was in control of a different legion of Supermarines. And Supermarines are giant, human, genetically modified, like, super soldiers, basically. They have all sorts of crazy abilities, super strength, they have multiple of every organ, they can spit poison, the whole fucking 9 yards. Now, back to the Primarchs being impure. Well, they were impure in the way that not all of them agreed with the way that the Emperor decided to treat them, and not all of them agreed with the way that the Imperium was ran. Specifically, one named Horus. Horus created something, or did something, called the Horus Heresy, which is basically where he overthrew his dad, the God Emperor, Big E, and he basically tried to kill him. Well, Horus and the other Primarchs who decided to side with him, they basically decided to go with the Chaos Gods instead of the Emperor of Mankind, because they thought that they were being shafted, basically. And so Horus and the other Primarchs that joined him decided to revolt against the Emperor of Mankind because they thought they were being mistreated, and they thought that the Chaos Gods' ideologies were better. Well, when this happened, that basically led to the death, sort of the Emperor of Mankind. I say death sort of because he's not really dead, but he is in a vegetable state and he can't do anything in the physical realm really at all anymore. However, they have him now stuck in a big giant chair, terrible, covered in skulls. It's a horrible monstrosity of a life support machine. A fun fact about the Emperor's chair that he resides on, another reason they keep him specifically in that room, in that chair, and don't move him anywhere else, because there's a massive giant chaos warp portal directly under his chair, and you know, if he were to move, then just demons, dude, everywhere. Demons would just spew into the fucking Earth. Now, we already talked about one of them, the Space Marines. There's a lot of factions within the Imperium. I would say probably the biggest is the Adeptus Mechanicus and the Space Marines. The Adeptus Mechanicus are so big that I kind of considered putting them in their own, category, but I decided against that, and instead we'll just mention them at the end, and I'll talk about them a little bit. But the other factions within the Imperium are the Astra Militarum, the Inquisition, the Navis Imperialis, and many others. The Astra Militarum and the Navis Imperialis are just fancy ways of saying the ground forces and the space forces of the Imperium of Man. The Inquisition, however, is a little bit different in the fact that the Inquisition roots out heretics and religious miscreants in the Imperium and murders them or does horrible things to them. There's a whole game based on it, Dark Tide. You should give it a play, it's pretty fun. But anyway, back to the Inquisition. That leads into our next thing about being the Imperium of Man is extremely religious. Now, the Emperor of Mankind himself was actually super atheist, going so far as to exterminate an entire planet for trying to worship him when he was alive. However, now that he's dead, stuck in a chair, they all worship him like a god due to his godlike powers. They all just deify him and see him as this glorious golden figure that they all worship and revere. Now, it is very, very, very illegal to not do anything that is of the God Emperor's will in the Imperium. You say the God Emperor sucks, you're probably gonna die, or the Inquisition will take you away, or both. This is especially true if you're a psyker, because the Imperium of Man does not like psykers, because psykers are especially hard to control given their connection to the warp. Now, the next faction that we're going to talk about is the Chaos. These guys closely relate to the Imperium in the fact that the Chaos is basically the #1 enemy of the Imperium, and they cause a lot of problems for them. Each of the Chaos gods are born at different times throughout history. Since the Chaos and the Warp and Immaterium is the opposite of real space is like logic and, analytical stuff and science. It all makes sense. However, the Chaos and the Warp is emotion and psychic energy and things like that. It's the opposite. And because of that, because the Warp is so in tune with people's emotions and people's souls reside in the Warp, when enough people feel enough things, they manifest in the Warp as entities or gods. Now, the 4 Chaos gods, Khorne, Nurgle, Tzeentch, and Slaanesh, they were all born at different times. Khorne, Nurgle, and Tzeentch were all born in semi-normal ways through semi-normal events. Khorne was born during the Mongol invasions, Nurgle was born during the Black Plague, and Tzeentch was born during the Renaissance. However, Slaanesh was born a little bit more complicated in the fact that Slaanesh is the embodiment of all the kinks and horrible sexual depravity of the Eldar, which we'll get to in a minute. The first Chaos god that was ever born is Khorne. He is the god of all things war and battle related. He encompasses things like war, hatred, rage, honor, and strength. Chaos gods are not inherently bad. They just kind of follow whatever emotions they embody. So, as Khorne is filled with rage, he also will always have honor. Khorne also does not like to do anything sick or twisted to people. He simply just wants blood and death, and honestly, a lot of times he just tells his people, yo, kill this dude as quick as fucking possible. The second Chaos god would be Nurgle. He is the second oldest one. He is the god of all things disgusting and pestilent and decaying and despair. He is the god also, however, of rebirth. Funny enough, despite all the disgusting things that Nurgle embodies, people actually call Nurgle Papa Nurgle, because Papa Nurgle is notably the nicest Chaos god. He has been known to give his most devoted followers even the ability to not feel any kind of pain. The third and the most odd Chaos god would definitely be Tzeentch. Tzeentch is basically a big fucking nerd. Tzeentch is a bit confusing in the fact that he's the god of fate, destiny, but also mutation and change. Tzeentch is all about things ever changing and learning new things and people's destinies and things like that. And because of that, a lot of times when Tzeentch will make plans, he'll change them last minute, and then they'll fucking just fail or something like that. Or Zinch will just decide, oh, I don't want to do that plan now because, you know, that would be too easy or something like that. It's actually been known that Zinch a few times has intentionally nerfed himself because he thought himself to be too strong and wanted the world to change. The fourth and final Chaos God, which in my opinion is the absolute most disgusting, terrible thing, is Slaanesh. So Slaanesh is the god of all things depraved, sinful. She's the god of greed, pleasure, pain, excess, and lust. Slaanesh was created originally when the Eldar became too prosperous, and thus life became too easy for them. Well, when life became too easy for them, they turned to other things to bring them happiness, sex, kinks, all the bad stuff. And kind of the idea is that the Eldari, they had so much terrible kinky sex that the universe, our galaxy exploded and Slaanesh was born. Now Slaanesh is definitely the last Chaos God you would ever want to be captured by. If you are captured by a minion of Slaanesh, you might as well just like off yourself or something, because they will do the most ungodly, terrible things to you. So terrible, I probably can't name them on YouTube because I will get in trouble. But it starts with an R, and a lot of other bad things. Now it's the first funny faction. Orcs are the goofy guys. Orcs are the little funny green fellows that run around and cause a ruckus everywhere, do all sorts of wacky things. Orcs were originally created millions of years ago. They were created by an alien race called the Old Ones. They were originally a lot larger, smarter, and stronger. They were also called Krorks back then. And the Old Ones created them to fight the Necrons during the War in Heaven, alongside the Eldar. Orcs are insanely warlike. They need to basically fight to survive. They will actually die if they do not fight people. Like, it's that of a necessity to them. Also, weirdly enough, orcs are a fungus. So, you know, it's pretty commonly known throughout the galaxy in Warhammer 40k that if an orc infestation happens on a planet, like if you find orcs on a planet, you might as well just fucking exterminatus it, or you're gonna have to fight them forever because they will never go away. You will never get them out of the planet. Now, the orcs have some sort of weird kind of chaos mentality power thing called the Wa. Now the Wa is a sort of, it's like a mindset but also an action. The Wa is a psychic field that is created when enough orcs are around each other and have the same goal in mind, and it increases in power depending on how many orcs there are. But also on top of the Wa being, you know, a psychic power that is created from community with the orcs, it's also kind of a mindset because the orcs have this gods, I should say, named Gork and Mork. And a lot of times orcs will have their gods, Gork and Mork, come to them in dreams and things like that and tell them of great crusades they need to go on in order to battle and, you know, win glory and all that jazz. And usually these things can range anywhere from like, go kill 1 million humans or go destroy a planet or, you know, something like that. But it only needs to start with one orc. As soon as one orc starts to go out and kind of spout these ideas and like try to gather more people, a Wa is created if enough orcs are gathered, which is a terrifying event. It is basically a giant wave of millions of orcs just traveling in a large pack all the way across the galaxy, destroying, ravaging, tearing apart everything they come across, all in the name of whatever goal they so choose. Well, when these Was happen, the psychic power the orcs have gets a lot stronger, and a lot of times the orcs use really garbage guns. These things are like scrap weapons. They don't work if you're not an orc. But the reason they don't work if you're not an orc is because you don't have the Wa. The Wa kind of is like an imagination power in a way. If the orcs imagine certain things, they can make them happen. A lot of times people get this idea wrong and they just kind of think that the orcs just create nothing out of, you know, their mind. It's not true. It's not how it works. Very sad to say. I'm sorry guys, I ruined the meme. Anyway, the orcs, they can do things more simple, like they can be like, purple is a stealth color. Obviously, purple's not a stealth color. You look at purple, it's like, wow, that's really bright and you fucking glaring. But no. The orcs, though, if they wear purple, they will genuinely be stealthier, and it will be harder for people to find them because of their psychic powers. Another very important part of orc society that's not as big but still very important are squigs. Squigs, as described by the orcs, are these little squiggly little guys, and they're like little troll fellas, like little goblins or something, but they are just the backbone of orc society, basically. The squigs come in every single shape and size ever, and they come in every single flavor, I guess you could say. Squigs can come from the form of oil squigs, or they can come in the form of food squigs, or even face-biting squigs, which is known in the Imperium as probably one of the most terrifying and terrible squigs, because they do exactly what they're called. They eat your face off. Another really important faction in 40k would be the Eldari, or also known as the Eldar. They're your classic, like, you know, fantasy elf people. Now, the Eldari were created millions of years ago, by the Old Ones in order to fight the Necrons and the C'tan, which we'll get a little bit to later when we talk about the Necrons. The Eldari are an extremely advanced people, very technologically able, and in the past, they actually used to live forever, because at that point, they didn't have any presence in the warp. They didn't have any souls, because Slaanesh had not been created yet. So as soon as an Eldari would die, they would reincarnate. Well, that all changed when, you know, the great Slaanesh incident happened. When Slaanesh was born, it kind of fucked up literally everything in the galaxy, especially for the Eldari. There is a giant warp hole basically in the center of the galaxy now called the Eye of Terror, and there are demons that just spew out of it. And it's caused by the Eldari when they birth Slaanesh from their depraved, terrible actions. Now, Slaanesh hates the Eldari most out of any faction in Warhammer 40k. Slaanesh doesn't really care where he gets their souls. However, they prefer if it's Eldari because those are the ones that created them, so Slaanesh is more aligned with that. Slaanesh also, when he was first created, Slaanesh devoured as many Eldari as possible, including almost every single Eldari god besides a couple. The most important of those gods is probably Isha, who was the goddess of fertility. She was kidnapped by Slaanesh originally and kept alive. I don't really know why. But then she was kidnapped by Nurgle, and I do know why she was kidnapped by Nurgle. It's quite horrible. Nurgle just feeds her diseases constantly, and when he feeds her diseases, he wants to, I think, eventually find a disease to kill her or something, or just torture her. But she's such a good god that as Nurgle feeds her these diseases, behind Nurgle's back, she will whisper the cures to all the people who are still alive in the universe. Now, there are a lot of Eldari still remaining, but they're mostly scattered, and they're broken up into a lot of different factions with different ideologies. The probably biggest of the Eldari factions would be the Drukhari, which the Drukhari are the ones that have decided the best way to deal with Slaanesh is to just try and satiate her. The Eldari basically, they kidnap, they R-word, they do all sorts of the worst, terrible, depraved, horrible things to as many people as they can in order to hopefully please their god Slaanesh, so that Slaanesh does not steal their souls. Next up faction that we're going to talk about would be the Necrons. The Necrons are originally a humanoid species. They were plagued with a lot of terrible, horrible sicknesses and cancer because of their proximity to an extremely hot star. Because of this terrible low lifespan that they had, the Necrons were constantly seeking out ways to extend it, and in their search for these ways, they discovered an ancient species called the Old Ones. The Old Ones are like basically your classic lizard people. Now, the Old Ones, they were very jealous. The Necrons were very jealous of the Old Ones because the Old Ones lived forever. And so because of this, the Necrons really wanted a reason to go to war with the Old Ones simply out of jealousy. The Necrons searched for a very, very long time until eventually they found a ancient primordial being race called the C'tan. Now, the C'tan are terrible creatures that just go around and devour all of the energy from all the stars in the galaxy. As soon as they're done with one, they just move on to the next, and that's all they knew. However, once the Necrons began making contact with them and actually, like, involving with them, the Satan started to form more devious and terrible motives. The Satan basically tricked the Necrons into kind of worshiping them like gods, and the Necrons created these physical, organic metal amalgam bodies for the Satan to come and inhabit, so that they had a physical body to live through. Well, the Satan kind of tricked the Necrons and made a deal with them and was like, hey, you know those old ones? We hate them. They didn't hate them at all. It's just a lie. And the Necrons were like, yeah, we hate them too. And then the Satan were like, yeah, okay, we'll go to war with them. Or rather, if you help us go to war with them, then we'll give you eternal life. Which technically they didn't lie about, but they were assholes anyway. The Satan took the Necrons and basically enslaved their entire race, took their souls and put them into these metal bodies that they had created, which now created an entire race of soulless, unempathetic, unfeeling creatures that could no longer feel any sort of happiness or love. Now, fast forward 60 million years, the Necrons have been asleep the whole time. Their last king, the Silent King, he ordered them to basically all get in their tomb worlds, go to bed for 60 million years until the galaxy is new again and there's new life and it's ripe for us to take over and steal everything from. And so fast forward 60 million years, it's now. It's the 41st millennium and the Necrons are waking up. They're like, hey, it's time to go. We gotta wake up. So these tomb worlds, though, since they've been so untaken care of and asleep for so long, they're kind of just falling into disrepair. A lot of them have been destroyed, or they just have been corrupted in some kind of way. And because of that, the Necrons have been awakening very, very slow. Sometimes tomb worlds don't even awaken at all. However, the most common reason tomb worlds will awaken is because people go poking where they shouldn't. Specifically, my favorite best boys, the cyborgs, Adeptus Mechanicus. They will go in there and they will just fuck with the Necrons as much as they want and steal all their loot and Blackstone and technology. Necrons do not get happy about that. The next faction, which is actually the only faction in Warhammer 40k where I think you could probably argue that they might be good, or at least semi-good, which would be the Tau Empire. Tau are a humanoid species who were first discovered 6,000 years ago by the Adeptus Mechanicus, and 6,000 years ago they were in the Stone Age. Well, the Tau Empire have been advancing and evolving extremely quickly, so much so that only 6,000 years ago they were in the Stone Age, but now their technology rivals and is better than some other factions in Warhammer 40k. Now, the thing that separates the Tau Empire from every other faction in Warhammer 40k is the fact that they believe in a philosophy called the greater good. The Tau Empire believes that peace and prosperity for everyone should be put first and foremost. Now, the only time this gets a little bit dicey is that when they try and make alliances with alien races, if the alien race says yes, then they join the Tau Empire and it's all good. However, if an alien race were to say no to the Tau Empire, most of the time it leads to the Tau forcefully vassalizing them, basically. Now, the Tau Empire is kind of structured around the fact that every single subsect, like every single nation within the Tau Empire, all has specific things that they do, specific things they work on, and everybody is expected to complete their goal to completion. And despite the young age of the Tau, they're actually a very large threat to a lot of other nations in Warhammer 40k, just simply because of their philosophy that they have and the fact that their technology can very well rival a lot of the other factions. The Imperium of Man specifically hates the Tau Empire a lot, because there are actually some human factions within the Tau Empire who have sort of defected to the Tau, and obviously that's mega heresy. That's like, you don't even get a court trial, bro. You just get sent out in the space lock or something. The next up faction in 40k would be the Tyranids. The Tyranids are a hive mind insectoid race that thrives simply off of going everywhere and eating and devouring everything. Now, the big thing about the Tyranids is that they're extremely mysterious. The Tyranids are not from the galaxy. They came from somewhere else. Where? We have no idea. It's extremely difficult to get information out of the Tyranids because of their nature as a hive mind. If you were to actually capture a Tyranid, which is extremely difficult, they most definitely wouldn't give you any information. They'd probably try and eat themselves or some crazy shit. The Tyranids are not just one type of alien. They're not just one insect or something. They are an entire ecosystem of a super organism that all share the same genetic base, and basically their whole goal is they go across the galaxy devouring literally every single organic piece of matter in their way. And the reason they do this is because the Tyranids strive to collect as much genetic mass as possible, and from this genetic mass they gain new genetic traits that help them evolve. Now, a really terrible fun fact about the Tyranids: they have a special power called the shadow in the warp. Now, the shadow in the warp is basically how you know that you're fucked when the Tyranids are coming. The shadow in the warp is something that we're not quite sure how it's created, but it's assumed that it's created from the nature of the Tyranids being a hive mind. They block out connection to the immaterium or the warp around them whenever they're on their way or in the same system as you. Now, for a normal person, this might just be seemingly normal, or you might feel a little odd and you might not notice it at all. However, if you are someone who is strongly connected to the warp, a psyker, it can be an extremely painful, terrible experience. In fact, psychers, if they're not strong enough, if they try to connect to the warp when the shadow in the warp is around, they will feel thousands, millions of Tyranids scratching at their mind trying to get in, and usually the Tyranids succeed, and the psyker goes completely insane, babbling just crazy nonsense tongues that nobody can coherently understand. A few honorable mentions that I wanted to talk about in the end, which I mentioned earlier a little bit with Adeptus Mechanicus, would be the first one, Adeptus Mechanicus. The Adeptus Mechanicus are a faction in the Imperium which actually, believe it or not, don't worship the God Emperor per se. They worship something called the Omnissiah, or the Machine God. The Adeptus Mechanicus believe that every single machine has a machine spirit in it, and all machine spirits are part of the Omnissiah, or the Machine God. The way they differ in religion from normal Imperium of Man is the fact that they believe that the Emperor of mankind is the Omnissiah because he is in the life support chair, so they view him basically as a giant machine god. The one true purpose of all Mechanicus, the one true thing they believe in, their philosophy, is that instead of making the flesh better or being okay in your flesh like the Imperium, which is all about woo humanity, the Adeptus want to ascend from their flesh. They want to replace every single piece of their body with a piece of machinery, because steel lasts forever.
From the moment I understood the weakness of my flesh, it disgusted me. I craved the strength and certainty of steel.
On top of this, because of their nature, the Mechanicus constantly want to take in all the knowledge of all of the galaxy, and because of this they oftentimes hoard a lot of knowledge, and that's where they come in and piss off the Necrons, because they just find tomb worlds and they're like, yo, fucking Necron technology, let's go. And then they go in there and the Necrons are like, get the fuck out, bro. The other main thing that the Adeptus Mechanicus do is they have a lot of forge worlds everywhere, which is why I kind of say that I feel like they are kind of their own faction, because they create all of the Imperium's tech and weapons, everything from Titans to the tiniest little lasgun. The Adeptus Mechanicus create it all, which basically means if the Adeptus Mechanicus were to somehow like die, or I don't know, like secede from the Imperium would be completely fucked and they would have nothing else left to fight with. Second honorable mention I wanted to talk about was the Gene Stealer cults. Now, the Gene Stealer cults are very creepy, highly secretive Tyranid cults that infiltrate hive worlds all around the Imperium. Now, what they do in these hive worlds is they create cults underneath the ground and try and, rally people to their cause. The Gene Stealer cults all worship different hive ships. And what they do is they rally enough people eventually to the point where they can basically send out a psychic message to the Tyranids and they can overthrow the planet, and and then the Tyranids will devour every single living thing on the planet, which obviously is a really big problem for the Imperium because they already have problems keeping their secrets and things safe. The last honorable mention I want to make, just because they're really cool and awesome I think, is the Adepta Sororitas, which is the Sisters of Battle. The Sisters of Battle are an all-female regiment of the Imperium of Man, and they are crazy hyper-religious. Like, so much so, if you get in a battle with them, they will drop churches on your head, entire churches, and rain holy water on you while stabbing you and murdering you and shooting you. On top of this, the Sisters of Battle are known to have such an extreme love for the Emperor that they can physically manifest miracles into existence. It has been known where Sisters of Battle have regenerated limbs in battle. Sisters of Battle have grown wings before and become actual physical saints and become immortal, which is in Warhammer 40k kind of a crazy thing because you have to have an extreme amount of connection to the Immaterium and belief in order to do that in the first place. Alright, cool. Thank you all for watching. That's gonna be the end of the video. I hope you all enjoyed. This is the first time I've ever made something like this. So if you like it, like it. If you wanna suggest anything to me, feel free to comment. I'll read them all if I can. And yeah, I'm probably gonna make this a whole series and I'm gonna make all sorts of videos. I know this one's not really super in-depth, but that's kind of not the nature of it. I wanted it to be broad and I wanted it to be a little quick, but in the future when I make other videos, I'll probably go a lot more in depth on the topics and choose more specific topics around certain things. So anyway, thank you. Have a good day.